Hello. Hello. All right, so we're live. The Voice is Unknown, written by Raz T. Slasher. I've seen a lot of things these last few years. Working security for the Twin Valley Behavioral Center. For all its fancy wording, it is a long term mental health facility. It's not maximum security or anything, but we still get our fair share of crazy moments here. I work the third shift, so by then, usually the patients are all asleep. Most nights, I keep an eye on the monitor and read a book on my phone. Occasionally, a new patient will be transported over in the middle of the night. But most times, even that, it is uneventful. Now and again, I'll have to take someone down for striking a staff member, riling up other patients, or trying to hurt themselves. It's all standard stuff for the most part. I think it's the craziest thing I've ever dealt with up until a few nights ago. Was the first female patient who swore to anyone that would listen that I was the Archangel Michael in human form. My friends and I got a huge kick out of it. A huge kick out of that when I told them. Even my mom and I had a few laughs over it. I usually tell her about my shifts when she asks. So a few nights ago, things started like every other shift. The patients were asleep for the most part, and I talked to one of the nurses while I peeked at the security monitor. We were talking about the latest episode of The Walking Dead, like we often did. I was right in the middle of my I Hate Andrea Trilliad when a call came over my radio. Look alive, Kevin. We got a new patient coming your way. Keep your eye on this one. Just putting him here till there's a spot open in Max. Just as a heads up, though, the guy is in his 30s. I was a little surprised, to be honest. We weren't exactly equipped to handle it. Was a much older building, outdated by a landscape compared to most places. That was the downside of having mental health issues in a relatively small town. The fact is, the fact that it was an adult they were bringing in was even more confusing. That had never happened before, to my knowledge. I sighed and keyed up my mic in response. Understood. What's your ETA? There was static on the walkie for a minute or so before the response came back. We just pulled up in front. We're coming in hot. Oh, great. That meant something had gone wrong. The nurse I'd been talking to looked a little scared, but I did my best to put her at ease before heading to unlock the front door. We'd gone to one of those key card systems. But due to the lack of a real budget, it was a hand me down from another state. So there were a few bugs. By the time I got the damn thing open, two of the transport guards had come flying through the door with a guy in cuffs. The guy looked like he couldn't be older than his early 30s. He had long dark hair, a matching goatee, and haunting hazel eyes that seemed to stare right through me. Various tattoos covered his somewhat pale skin. Once inside, I locked the door behind them and directed them to the ancient padded room that we almost never used anymore. There was a hospital bed in there that we kept in good condition for emergencies. I helped them get him onto the bed where we strapped him in. When the job was done, they wished me luck with a chuckle and left. They always bailed after bringing someone in, and I always invited that a bit. I tried to transfer to transport once, but got that speech about how useful I was where they had me. Once the transport guards left, it was my job to stay in the room with the nurse while she injected him with whatever it was they used to calm the patients. When they were having episodes, just before we left, no, wait, hold up, my bad. Just before we both left the room, the guy called us over and spoke to us. Can can you hear them? I immediately put all my money on a schizophrenia diagnosis. As if sensing this, the man looked directly into my eyes. For a crazy guy, he seemed a lot more focused than I had expected. He spoke to me directly now. They're telling me your name is Kevin and that you've been working here for 3 years now. I raised a brow at the guy. Well, his information was indeed correct. He could have easily overheard the transport guys talking about it. I decided not to put any stock in it and turned to leave the room with the nurse. The guy made one last attempt to keep us in the room. Your mother's name is Nancy, and you talk to her almost every night after work. Your father's name is Joe, and he passed away from cancer last spring. Still some standard stuff, but the kind I would expect the transport guards to talk about or even really know. I kept my personal life private while at work. I decided to humor the guy. How do you know all of that? The guy's eyes still had not left mine because they're talking about you right now. I rolled my eyes and looked over at the nurse. She seemed nervous, but wasn't making any move to leave the room. Since I couldn't leave her alone, I continued my conversation with the man. Who's talking about me? There's only three of us here, sir. The man shook his head adamantly as he spoke. I don't accept I do I don't expect you to see them. Not even I can see them. I can hear them though, as plain as day. I sighed and looked back at the nurse. She was just standing there watching the guy like he would grow a second head or something. I knew I had to snap her out of it, so I moved to stand directly in front of her as I addressed her. Is everything okay? We should probably leave the room now. She blinked at me a few times before getting out of it. Her voice was weak when she replied, Yeah, right. Yeah, you're right. Sorry about that. Let's get out of here. Without even sparing the guy another look, the two of us left the room and locked up the door behind us. We returned to the station we both sat at. I went back to looking at the monitors. After a few minutes of that, the nurse spoke up. There's something off about that guy. It's kind of creepy. I looked over at her with a bit of a chuckle before responding. We work in a mental hospital. Everyone here is a bit off. She shook her head at me and continued the conversation. It's more than that. I've seen plenty of schizophrenia patients in my time, but not one that knew personal information like that. I sort of waved her off. Everything he said was public record. Maybe he's just really into obituaries. I don't think we have anything to worry about. He's locked in a padded cell, cuffed to a bed. It's not like he's getting up or leaving anytime soon. The transport guards made it seem like this was temporary anyway. She smiled and apologized for being jumpy, and I told her not to worry about it. It was normal to be a little paranoid. Working late at night in a place like that, crazy had a way of affecting people, even the sanest ones. We resumed our conversation about The Walking Dead for a little while and ended up rehashing a lot of our same arguments before the conversation was over. She excused herself to do some rounds, and I went back to keeping an eye on the monitors. Someone had the foresight to install one in the padded cell, so it made my job even easier. When I looked at the feed, the guy seemed to be talking to someone. I looked through the feed a bit, and as I expected, there wasn't anyone else in there with him. I watched him for a few more minutes before checking the other feeds. A little while later, the nurse showed up and seemed freaked out. I was curious now and asked her about it. Is everything okay? You're looking pretty pale right now. She looked at me oddly before speaking. Have you been messing with me? For the second time that night, I raised a brow. I had no idea what the hell she was talking about and didn't mind saying so. What are you talking about? I've been sitting right here the whole time. She plopped down into the chair next to mine, and I noticed her shaking a little. She sat there collecting herself. I swear, I heard someone talking to me in the back hallway just a few seconds ago. I thought maybe it was you trying to screw with me. Swear it wasn't you? Certain she just scared herself. I put her mind at ease. Wasn't me. And I didn't see anyone but you on the camera feed. What did you hear? She looked me square in the face. Did you break your left arm trying to get a cat out of a tree when you were 8? I sat there a little straighter in my chair and glared at her. I knew for a fact it wasn't something we'd ever talked about. Someone had to be fucking with me, and my money was on Ben from Transport. I'd played a great prank on him a few months back at a party, and he swore he'd get me back one of these days. It seemed odd to use a patient to do it, but at this point, I wasn't putting anything past him. I snapped at the nurse. Did Ben put you up to this? She shook her head. And put a hand on my arm. There were tears glistening in her storm gray eyes. She swallowed hard and barely even managed to speak to me. No, I swear, I heard someone talking about you in the hallway. You have to believe me, Kevin. I shook her off and stood up immediately, deciding to check things out for myself. This joke was losing its humor very quickly, and I planned on getting to the bottom of it as soon as possible. I clipped the radio to my belt and headed into the back hallway. I walked up and down it a few times, listening hard to hear whatever it was the nurse had been talking about. When I didn't hear anything, I went back to the nurse. I stood there in front of the desk a while. I talked to her. Oh, wait, hold up, my bad. In front of the desk while I talked to her. Let's go. I want to question the new patient, but I'm not allowed to without a staff member. She looked terrified at the thought of seeing that guy again, and it took quite a while of convincing to get her to change her mind. After some debate, she followed me slowly. When we got there, I unlocked the door with my keycard and we stepped inside. I reached down and put the rubber stopper under the bottom of the door. Neither of us wanted to get accidentally locked inside with the guy. Remember when I mentioned how outdated the place was earlier? Yeah, once that door closes, it auto locks and can only be opened from the outside. After a guard and no, After a guard and a nurse got stuck in there with a violent patient, someone brought a stopper to keep it from happening again. I felt a little weird about trusting my safety and well being to a wedge shaped piece of rubber. With that issue all settled, I stood back up and turned my attention to the guy cuffed to the bed. All right, man. I'm going to ask you a few questions. For starters, did Ben give you all that information on me while you were being transported here? The guy just sort of shook his head as much as he could. In his position as he spoke, I don't know which one of them was Ben, but no, the voices told me. As I said before, they tell me a lot of things. I moved on to my next question almost immediately. I didn't want to have to stay in this room any longer than I needed to. Who do these voices belong to? It wasn't that I believed in what was going on, but I felt like I needed to cover all my bases. This was a weird situation, no matter how you at it. The guy responded easily enough. I'm not exactly sure, but I've been hearing them for years. I nodded at that and considered what my next option was. I came up with a great test quickly and laid it out for him. Mind if we try a little experiment? I want to ask you a question about something I've never told anyone before. Why are you growling? Holy shit, my dog scared the fuck out of me. If the answer is right, I might believe you. The guy nodded, as if to invite the question. I thought of a great one and got on it with it. What was the name of the girl I lost my virginity to? And where did it happen? The guy looked around the room a bit, as if listening for an answer. After a few minutes of silence, he looked back at me and answered the question. Her name was Jessica, and you were in the back of a red and white pickup truck with a white topper. I took a deep breath after hearing that. No one knew about what happened with Jessica, let alone that it had happened in a truck. I decided to ask one more question just to make sure. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. After all, okay, here's the next question. What am I most afraid of? I knew for a fact no one could answer this question. Not even my mother knew the answer to this one. Just like before, there was a few minutes of silence in which the guy looked around the room. Just before he could answer, however, the nurse beat him to the punch. You're terrified of being alone ever since you were a kid, and your babysitter locked you in that closet so she could spend more uninterrupted time with her boyfriend. She threatened to tell your mother about the horror comic collection you weren't supposed to have if you told on her. My eyes grew wide as I stared at the nurse. They were clearly both hearing the same voice, and obviously I could not. I was officially starting to get creeped out now. I even felt a chill run down my spine. New questions came to my mind, and I looked back at the guy. Is that why you're here? Because of the voices? He shook his head and set the record straight. No, I'm here because I killed someone. The voices told me to do it. I gave a slight pause at that. I hadn't expected him to be a murderer. I could not even speak at that point in time. My frayed nerves were more that than obvious. Unable to think straight, I violated protocol and left the nurse in the room, returning to the desk to sit down. I didn't feel prepared for what was happening and felt like I needed to put as much distance between myself and what was happening as I could without losing my job. According to the feed, the nurse pulled the stopper as she left the room and was heading in my direction. She sat down in the chair next to me, and neither of us looked at each other or said a word. For what felt like forever, I continued checking the monitors like I always did. But at that point, the lack of conversation was starting to get a little bit uncomfortable. I finally turned my head toward her and spoke. I can't wait till they get that guy out of here. This shit seriously is seriously starting to get to me a little. The nurse just kind of nodded a bit. She was still every bit as pale as she had been earlier. So I knew for a fact she was more freaked out than I was. Before she could say anything in response to him, her eyes suddenly started darting around all over the place, and she stood. I looked at myself and didn't see a damn thing. So I attempted to get to the bottom of it. What's going on now? Do you? She cut me off with a light shh and a finger to her lips. This went on for a good couple of minutes, causing shivers to once again radiate through my spine. Eventually, she looked at me with fearful eyes. The voices. I think they're children. I I didn't notice it before, but now it's clear as day. You really can't hear them? I shook my head and looked at her. She was batshit crazy. Oh shit, hold up. I shook my head and looked at her. She was batshit crazy. I couldn't hear her. I couldn't hear a damn thing. And still harboring the thought of Ben fucking with me, I made up my mind to radio him and confront him about it. When things settled down again, for the moment, though, I was a little curious about what the voices were saying. The fact that the voices belong to kids makes it that much more fucked up, you know. So what are they saying now anyway? I could see tears slowly starting to stream from her eyes. In place of a proper response, she suddenly leaned down and hugged me tightly, which was sort of uncomfortable. I didn't know her well enough for her to be violating my personal space like that. I tried to pry her off, but she just kept squeezing me tighter and crying. She managed to get a few words out between sobs. I'm so sorry, Kevin. I didn't know. What the hell was she going on about now? I was starting to leave. That creeped out. Feeling behind, and I edged closer and closer towards being seriously pissed off. I pushed her off as hard as I could without hurting her and broke the hold she had on me. I stood up immediately and rounded on her. Tell me what the fuck you're talking about right now. I'm getting tired of this shit. She started to step toward me again, but took a quick couple of steps back. There was no way in hell I was letting that woman put her arms around me like that again. It's not like she wasn't attractive. She was. I just didn't like a single thing about the entire situation. At any other time, though, it might have been a different story. She stopped trying to get close to me, wiped her eyes as best as she could, and spoke to me. I had no idea about what happened to you, your little boy. I'm always here if you need to talk. I couldn't even speak. The adrenaline was pumping through my veins like fire at this point. Only my ex and my mother knew about that. It wasn't in a newspaper or anything. Blake had passed away when he was only a few months old. SIDS, they said. I teared up a little myself and just stared at her. Whatever was going on, I was certain now that it couldn't be Ben fucking with me.